everyone. Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. This is sort of a morning after bit. I'm kind of doing reviewing the games. I don't know if I'll do this every week, but I did want to do this this morning just because I felt like last night we were all mad on the podcast for obvious reasons. And it wasn't necessarily the most productive conversation at points. So, we were all just kind of letting it out. But I did want to get to some of the bigger points to talk about in reference to this Chargers Chiefs game and everything that went down last night. So that's why I did want to kind of record this video and get this show on the road here. I did want to talk about the main big storyline for me last night, which is kind of, obviously we could talk about Justin Herbert and how long he'll be out for. That's going to be very important. But in terms of things that determined the outcome from last night, I do think we have to talk about the Brandon Staley decision making. And then in his press conference, we heard a lot of the same stuff that we kind of heard in week one. Obviously, it didn't affect us quite as much in that game because when the Chargers did play conservative in week one, it worked out for them and they got the win over the Raiders. But they punted on 4th and short in Chiefs territory on a number of occasions. Obviously, there was the first drive where they take the field goal, which I actually didn't think was that bad of a decision. But ultimately, the Chargers played a much less aggressive game than they played against the Chiefs last season, and of course against the Raiders in the final week of last year too. So there is an aspect of this to me where we're talking about a phase shift for Brandon Staley after obviously he was very unremorseful in terms of his decision making last year, right? It was very much a process over results thing. Sure, we didn't get that 4th down, but the model said to go for it, right? And now ignoring what a few of the models said last night in terms of the fact that Brandon Staley should have gone for it, we've now seen 2 games in a row, particularly last night against Patrick Mahomes, where Brandon Staley's played a conservative, and obviously in his post-game presser, had a couple points, or a couple punts from Chiefs territory. He said that they were trying to flip the field. He trusted the way the defense was playing, and he wanted to pin them back. I don't have to say much to say that this is just not the Brandon Staley approach that we saw in 2021. I don't know if that's in response to the media criticizing him after the Raiders game last year. I don't know if it really just is trusting the defense more, but on some level, you have Justin Herbert, you're in Arrowhead Stadium. A lot of those decisions too happened prior to Justin Herbert getting injured the way he did, unfortunately. And still Brandon Staley kind of just decided to, put it in the hands of J.K. Scott on one too many occasions, in my opinion. And so, I do want Staley to, coming up here, get back to that 4th down aggressiveness. Now, again, you're going to be playing the Jaguars and the Texans. Again, I don't think any of these opponents are opponents you should underestimate, but I can understand trusting your defense a little bit more in those games against those teams than I can, trusting your defense over Justin Herbert in a week where you're playing Patrick Mahomes in a big rivalry game in Arrowhead. And so just a lot of confusing offensive decisions last night. The Chargers, as far as their route trees and concepts under Joe Lombardi as well, just weren't very creative. They just sort of kept running the same mesh hitch concepts for a lot of the game. So, I think while the overall offensive numbers kind of ended up being okay for the Chargers, they were pretty uninventive in some of those scenarios. And you just wish that maybe once or twice they went for it on 4th down when they didn't, in hopes of, finding some momentum or getting a big play to DeAndre Carter, getting a big conversion with Austin Eckler, a QB sneak by Herbert, whatever it might have been. And the Chargers just kind of, punted on a lot of those opportunities last night, both figuratively and literally. So, gotta say, I'm pretty disappointed with the coaching staff when it comes to the 4th down decisions last night, especially after how much Brandon Staley has defended his thought process when it comes to those types of issues on the team. So that I thought was pretty underwhelming last night. I did want to get to some snap count talk, just because we didn't have these numbers in front of us last night when we did the show. but I thought they were worth talking about anyway, just because I think they're kind of interesting to dive into here. So the one that sticks out to me on offense personally is that of Jalen Guyton. Jalen Guyton played 8 snaps last night for 11% of the 75 Chargers offensive snaps. It goes without saying that this is a Chargers wide receiver group that doesn't have a lot of speed, right? DeAndre Carter is their fastest receiver, right? I mean, whether you're talking about a wide receiver, a running back, or a tight end, even when Keenan Allen's healthy, he's a route running technician. DeAndre Carter is now their fastest guy that they're actually playing. He played 65% of the snaps last night. Josh Palmer, 91, Mike Williams, 88, and Jalen Guyton, 11% on 8 snaps. So I just don't understand the thought process here, especially when you need big plays against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. This is a regime that cut Tyron Johnson. This is a regime that's now phasing out Jalen Guyton. And this is a regime that drafted Josh Palmer. And, the fastest player on the team right now is 30-year-old DeAndre Carter, who is ultimately a rental from the Washington Commanders. I just don't understand not giving a player like Jalen Guyton more snaps, more respect, and more usage, especially after his season last year, where I felt like he got a lot better at some of the things he did with Tyron Johnson in 2020. So it's just weird to, see the Chargers continuously kind of like try to get the big play and then do things in their offense, like not play Jalen Guyton more, that, really prevent them from opening things up and make them play more of a dink and dunk game against the Chiefs. So that part of it was weird. Aside from that, I guess there's not too much weird stuff on offense. The Josh Palmer stuff, I'll get to that later when we talk about some of the PFF grades. I did think the running back usage was just kind of weird and has been these first 2 weeks. Maybe the Chargers really are aiming for a running back by committee type scenario. But, last week you had 49% snaps for Austin Eckler. This week he's up to 63, but that's still pretty low. And the other 37% is made up by Joshua Kelly and Sony Michel. I'm a little bit surprised that we just haven't seen more production from Austin Eckler this year and more usage from him. I thought the Chargers would lean a bit more heavily on him than they have to this point. So that is a little bit surprising to me on the offensive end. And then when it comes to Joshua Kelly and Sony Michel, I guess I'm not terribly surprised that they're playing Sony Michel that much. But then, why is Isaiah Spiller inactive? I don't know why they favor Sony Michel so much at this point over a healthy Isaiah Spiller. That's something I'd like to know more about. Maybe it's just a matchup dependent type situation from week to week. But I don't really understand at this point why they feel that that's the option, especially after how Sony Michel's played the first 2 weeks, which has been pretty mediocre at best at this point. Not a whole lot to point out on the defensive side of the ball in terms of snap count. No, I think everyone is pretty much as expected on the defensive side of the ball. Nothing that really stands out over here. Obviously, J.C. Jackson back in the fold. He ends up playing 100% of the snaps. We'll get to how he played those snaps later in some respects. But overall, pretty solid game in terms of how the defense was divvied out snaps wise. And I don't really have too many criticisms over here. Overall, the defense played a really great game. And I don't think it should be understated now just because they lost, right? And the results obviously, speak for themselves, but they allowed 27 to a Chiefs team, and really they allowed 20 because of the Justin Herbert pick six that happened with the Gerald Everett thing where he should have come out of the game. That's another thing. I don't really know why the Chargers went hurry up in that situation, and if they were going to go hurry up, I don't understand why they didn't just try to run the ball with Eckler at that point, especially with it being 3rd and goal. And you get another 4th down play after where you could have reset and done something else. So if the Chargers were going to go hurry up, I don't know why that was the decision. to go A, for a passing play, and then B, a passing play to a player who was clearly exhausted from all the usage. And so, I don't know. And it does, speak to itself. He had a lot of usage in the second half, and Gerald Everett really put it all out there. So, you can't bash him after last night for sure. Especially after Tyler's bold prediction came true, and he actually out-received Travis Kelce, which is not something I really expected to happen. But that's all I got to say on the Chargers snap counts. I did want to talk about some PFF grades, just so we can kind of generally talk about some of these Chargers topics as well, and some of the player performances. Let me just pull this up from my Twitter. The grades are live on PFF if you want to check them out yourself. But top 5 Chargers offensive grades from Thursday Night Football: Mike Williams with an 81.8, Rashawn Slater with a 78.7, Gerald Everett with a 74.7, Horvath 74.5, king of efficiency Xander Horvath at this point, Corey Linsley with a 71.9. So obviously that was prior to him coming out of the game in favor of Clapp. But ultimately, Rashawn Slater had a really good game, especially with Matt Filer kind of failing in this game around him. Pipkins going down in favor of Norton, Linsley going down, and then Clapp having to come in. I thought that Rashawn Slater and his dominance so far this year and continuing with what he did his rookie year is actually just really impressive. Mike Williams obviously had a big bounce back game. Was really impressed with him and how he played. Gerald Everett obviously, played well until, the snap where, he was just exhausted and kind of didn't. And the Chargers decided to go hurry up in spite of that anyway. But yeah, overall, good offensive game from all of these guys. I did, however, want to dip into the negative, unfortunately, and talk about the bottom 5 offensive grades as well. And I want to talk about this for the defense when we get to that as well. Matt Filer, 35.1, Trey McKitty, 46.4, Trey Pipkins, 50.5. The Trey Pipkins one I actually kind of disagree on because I think he only allowed 1 pressure in 27 snaps. So I'm not sure why his grade is that low in general. That could also be a run blocking issue potentially. But I honestly did not think Trey Pipkins was deserving of that grade, to be honest. Josh Palmer, on the other hand, though, had a disconnect with Herbert really all night, never really got his, footing under him. I mean, he did get the touchdown towards the end of the game, which probably raised his grade quite a bit from where it would have been had he not gotten that touchdown. But yeah, weird place that we're at with Josh Palmer at this point, because I mean, we had the issues with Chase Daniel in the preseason where those two were never in sync. And now Herbert seemed kind of visibly frustrated with some of the routes that Josh Palmer was running last night, and how he wasn't really like going fully through and completing the process on some of those routes. And it seemed like that was why they were off the whole night. Some people said it was bad throws by Herbert, but to me, honestly, it fell on Josh Palmer last night on a couple of those plays. So I'm not terribly surprised by the Josh Palmer grade. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that in terms of usage, Josh Palmer is clearly the wide receiver 3. But in terms of like who Herbert actually trusts, I think Herbert clearly trusts DeAndre Carter more at this point. And that was evident last night and evident in week 1 as well. I just think he's out of sync with Palmer, and they need to find a way to get that back on track, especially with how important Josh Palmer is to this offense, particularly in a game where Keenan Allen is out. So that was a bit disappointing from last night. Top 5 Chargers defensive grades. Asante Samuel Jr. with an 87.7. Obviously, the dropped INT probably didn't help his case, and he might have actually had a 90 graded game had he gotten that one. But Asante Samuel Jr. played really well all night in spite of the drop picks. And one of them that probably shouldn't have been overturned anyway. But he played really well. Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack played well. What's new? Otito Ogbonya actually has a top 5 Chargers defensive grade from last night on, I believe, 11 snaps. So he played really solid. So maybe he can finally start to crack his way into this defensive rotation a little bit. And Derwin James, obviously, with the smackdown of a lifetime on Travis Kelce on that suplex, he has about a 70 grade on PFF from last night, which is solid. Derwin James did his job well last night, especially with how often he had to go against Travis Kelce and limit him and all those things. So overall, good night for these guys on the defense. And I do want to talk about the flip side of that, though, which is, of course, some of the guys who didn't quite show up on defense as well. The bottom 5 Chargers PFF defensive grades from week 2: J.C. Jackson with a 40.1, Drew Tranquil of 40.5, Loki Gilman of 43.2, Sebastian Joseph Day of 48.1, and Kenneth Murray of 48.6. Sebastian Joseph Day was pretty concerning in this game. It just felt like he was invisible for large stretches, unlike somebody like Austin Johnson, who actually got quite a few quarterback hits on Patrick Mahomes and just felt like he was more involved every play. Sebastian Joseph Day was just kind of MIA this game, and that's a little bit concerning, especially with how often, particularly early in that game, the Chiefs were sort of running up the middle and having a lot of success. So not the greatest game from SJD. JC Jackson obviously coming back, gets cooked by Justin Watson on the touchdown and nearly makes a play to get back, in that play, but his hips got completely turned out at the beginning and he just couldn't really recover after that point. But overall, kind of the defensive grades that you would expect. Drew Tranquil's grade is a little low for me. I actually thought he played better than indicated because his run defense grade was actually pretty high this game, than 80, but had some bad coverage snaps, which dropped his grade quite a bit. But overall, yeah, I would have liked to have seen more from J.C. Jackson, but at least he got on the field and is kind of working his way back into being that corner. And I think when his feet are under him, things will be fine and they'll ultimately work out. But yeah, it was just a little bit perplexing to see all of these things come into play for the Chargers in terms of their top 5 offensive guys, their bottom 5 offensive guys, and then the respective counterparts on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, that's about it for me of the wrap up. Disappointing loss. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments down below. Obviously, prayers and thoughts go out to Justin Herbert, who will be getting MRIs and everything, scheduled for today. So we hope that, all that stuff pans out and then he can play against Jacksonville and that he's ultimately okay. So that's definitely the biggest concern, leaving the game from last night. But let me know what you guys think the Chargers could have done better to win this game in the comments down below. And let me know if you're concerned. Are you concerned about the Chargers heading into some of these supposedly easier games than the Chiefs, or there's some long-term issues that need to be worked out with this team? So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I hope this therapy session was good for you, and I will see you guys tomorrow as we are doing a Q&A on Saturday, and then picking some of the league-wide NFL games. So that should be fun, but see you guys tomorrow.